Let's go.
Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome to my channel. Today's topic was inspired by two articles that I recently saw. One being that during a broadcast of Amazing Saturday, the cast didn't really know Nmixx like that, which, not gonna lie, was but also wasn't that shocking. And then I saw another article, but this time it was talking about how JYP artists have not been charting well, which is not always the indicator for success to a group. However, these two articles combined kind of placeboed me into thinking about how JYP was doing this year, and not gonna lie, it's been kind of quietish or pretty meh. Like, obviously, some have made some noise during their comebacks, but then it's kind of crickets after that, and I'm not seeing longevity like what I assume from JYP. All this to say, the plan is to look into each group within JYP and then kind of explain what is happening with them, and I guess a brief of what I'll be watching out for in the future for them. But yeah, before I start, I'd appreciate it if you can like and subscribe to my channel. Without further ado, let's start off with the first group. Starting off with the most senior group, my initial thoughts about 2PM was the typical, oh, for sure, they've obviously fallen off because they're not a priority anymore. And like, low-key, what is even happening with them? However, looking into what's happened, that's not the full story. I mean, starting off with their hiatus era of around 2016 to 2021, that was all because of Korea's compulsory military service. Then kind of almost like a minute after they came back completely, they immediately got a comeback, which I don't know if it's because JYP wanted to capture that hype of them reuniting after all this time, but smart move. They haven't had a comeback ever since, which might seem a little iffy, but then we also got to remember that they're second gen seniors. That's literally 3 generations behind the current one, and so they've all kind of branched off and done other things. They're also doing pretty well off individually to the point where 2PM is their legacy but not their main priority. Plus, they recently announced a solo concert in 2023 with it already being sold out in Korea, so 2PM is still going strong. I guess the only issue for them would be finding time to actually continue to reunite in terms of comebacks, because they're not nugu enough to need these comebacks, but I don't know if we would want girls' generation levels of hiatuses as senior groups. But in saying that, that's real nitpicky of an issue too, because overall, they're still doing pretty well for themselves. Moving on to the next group, we have Day 6 who are currently in their military era, with 2 of them having been discharged and the other 2 still enlisted. They've been kind of doing well for themselves overall. It's just because they're a band as opposed to being completely K-pop vibes, and so that's kind of why their impact isn't noticeable or felt like a standard K-pop group. The only thing I could kind of say was iffy, and still kind of is till this day, was how Jay departed from the group in 2021. I mean, I think he's still part of Day 6 in his and maybe our hearts, but not legally. The confusion stems from the fact that Jay announced that he would be taking a hiatus from group promotions, only for JYP on that same day to say that he was leaving both JYP and Day 6 for personal reasons. I know he was in a few controversies before all of this happened, plus he's been pretty open about his mental health struggles, so there's kinda a lot of factors that could explain both statements, but to have them not align was kinda sus. This, however, wasn't enough to impact Day 6, as Jay low-key wasn't that popular domestically compared to internationally, and so their fan base is pretty much the same-ish, considering they have a larger domestic fan base. Young K also has gotten a lot more recognition from his writing credits to Haiky's song Rose Blossom. I guess the only issue for Day 6 that I can see would be how the military enlistment hiatus will impact the group. And then also to that, what would be the prioritization for Day 6, considering they now have juniors in the form of Xdinary Heroes. Twice is up next, and I want to say there have been noticeable shifts in a lot of what Twice is doing, which is always risky to switch things up as you don't know how it will be received. I mean, starting off audience-wise, it feels like they've almost kind of peaked their popularity in Korea and thus have moved on to the international markets. I mean, there's been a noticeable push in America with the many concerts that they've had in America, as well as having 2 full English original songs. Along with that, there's also been an obvious shift in the musical direction from a more cutesy type of vibe to a more mature concept. I mean, people's musical preference is all subjective, and you can't really fault anyone because there are probably people who didn't vibe with their rookie era music like me. But yeah, that musical shift low-key coincided with the whole increase in popularity of K-pop. I mean, 2019 to 2020 saw an extreme rise in international awareness of K-pop in general, and so obviously with them having a bigger name, there's a greater likelihood of TWICE being the first exposure for many, and then to add in that subjectivity of people's musical preference, then that might even explain why the likability of TWICE's music is not as strong as during their rookie days. But yeah, the only issue for them is their musical direction for me. Personally, I don't think they need to revert back to their cutesy concept, but I feel like they might need to solidify their identity of this whole era. They're kind of experimenting a little because I can kind of categorize these types of mature concepts, and so it's not well defined as their rookie day music. So hopefully, I guess we get to see a bit more of a clearer concept as they continue on as OT9. Stray Kids is the next group and actually have grown to be one of the bigger faces of JYP. From debut to around 2020, they struggled a lot for JYP standards as they weren't able to solidify a fan base due to the genre of music they were making. It wasn't till 2020 when they released God's Menu where they finally started to progressively improve and get more success with each comeback. There has basically been an exponential increase in their success seen by the most recent comeback achieving 5 million sales. Besides that, the only kinda-ish issue I could kinda see for Stray Kids is the fact that I'm not sure how many genuine stays there are. Once again, a little nitpicky, but I feel like the fandom is really similar to other extremely popular groups where they really focus on achievements and numbers. This obviously helps Stray Kids through getting more recognition, but it doesn't feel quote-unquote genuine. Like, they would still have a sizable fan base, but not these crazy numbers that they pull, which is why the expectations versus reality in terms of success and longevity for me isn't really matched. Also, they're one of the few groups who can actually sustain success with a larger international fan base ratio, which is an impressive achievement in itself. Overall, they just seem like an embodiment of what K-pop has kind of become, so they'll literally thrive regardless. But if I were to focus on that one issue, it would be making music that has a bit more longevity. Obviously, that is subjective depending on the person listening to the music, but I do hope that we get another song that has the same impact as God's Menu. The biggest question mark for Itzy is that their career trajectory is kind of the reversal of Stray Kids' career. Like, they popped off during their debut to 2021, and then some changes happened where all of a sudden, Itzy wasn't going crazy as much. I mean, there was a slight musical shift in the way they presented their songs because it didn't feel completely teen crush anymore. Each comeback following Mafia in the Morning then switched it up a little in some way where all of a sudden, the reception was real 50-50. Their recent comeback of Cake is still being promoted as of recording this, but just on initial glance, it has gotten a better reception so far. One definite factor that can kind of contribute to why this reversal is kind of happening is that the competition was limited when they debuted, so they essentially set the standard. This has kind of changed with 2022's boom in thriving 4th gen girl groups, and now Itzy will need to put in some work to actually prove themselves within this competitive industry. I mean, the industry has evolved so much that Itzy cannot solely rely on group activities as a form of promotions. Solo promotions have become the standard in both promoting the individual members, but also promoting the group as a byproduct. K-pop has evolved to become so much more than just music, and so if you can get people to stan the group because of their personality or skills, then this could even offset the subjectivity of musical opinions. However, it seems like there's been a lack of promotions for certain popular members like Ryujin, which further limits the impact that these solo promotions could have. Thus, for Itzy to thrive, they'll need to solidify their musical direction a bit more to ensure that they can keep up with what the new generation has to offer, but also be more strategic with solo promotions, because they're always going to do alright overall, but compared with themselves, then we might see a slow regression. Xdinary Heroes is a real dark horse when it comes to JYP. Technically the juniors to Day 6, Xdinary Heroes are another band who started off a bit meh as they debuted around the same time as Nmixx. That means more attention was going elsewhere and thus they low-key got overshadowed. They're also a band, so once again, the attention received will not be equivalent to the same proportions of K-pop listeners. However, putting these two factors aside, they've done pretty well for themselves, going towards that rock genre. This has allowed them to focus on a niche market and grow a decent fan base with each comeback. The only thing I could see as an issue would be prioritization for once Day 6 does come back, but also with the amount of groups that JYP is trying to debut, as well as having on roster, where would they be on the list? The second thing is that niche markets do have their limits, so at what point will they kind of start running out of being able to capture new fans? Nmixx is probably the black sheep of JYP at the moment, in that we haven't seen the expected success that we would imagine from a JYP group. Nmixx popped off with their pre-debut videos showing off their talents. However, once they did officially debut, things took a bit of a swerve as their debut was met with the biggest confusion. Following the popularity of aespa's Next Level, Nmixx's debut went towards that mixed pop route. However, this was not executed as well, with many people calling the arrangement really messy. This was not the JYP that was expected and left many wondering what the future of Nmixx would be already. Then we would also see the departure of Jinny due to personal circumstances, which became the biggest shock for Nmixx fans. Jinny was pretty vital for Nmixx as she had a lot of popularity, as well as being the member to announce the switch up to the songs. What made it worse was the fact that JYP didn't provide any clarity and would then erase Jinny's existence from their socials. We would then see another switch up in their musical direction as they would leave behind the mixed pop and then go into a different direction. If confusing musical direction for a group was in the newspaper, Nmixx's image would be front page, because I'm really confused on what JYP is trying to do with them. It's clear that they have the talent considering they constantly get praised for it, but they just don't have the songs to back it up. That might even explain why they have a bit more casual listeners, and thus there is not much hype leading up to the singles, as the listeners have to wait till they properly hear their songs before justifying their support for Nmixx. As a result, this creates the illusion of lack of success because they're really doing well for themselves overall comparison with the 4th gen. But music direction wise, they'll need to figure out that as a must if they want to convert more casual listeners into being Nmixx stans. Lastly, we have one of the confirmed debuts for JYP in 2023. Formed from the survival program collab of JYP and P Nation, there has been a 2-year gap from when the show ended till now, where we have seen pretty much nothing from them. I mean, we saw the instant debut of P Nation's equivalent of the new 6, which has seen pretty decent success for both the group and P Nation. So I do wonder what's happening with JYP Loud. I mean, this long wait has already seen the departure of one of the winning members within the program, leaving both the company and the group, which is kind of weirdish because they also confirmed it through their Instagram as opposed to an announcement from JYP, which was what P Nation did when they removed Kogi. But yeah, this 2-year wait also means that there is a lot of momentum being lost, with the only real saving grace for success being that they're associated to JYP. There have also been rumors of JYP Loud potentially debuting going with extra members, which I don't know how I would feel about that. I mean, I wasn't invested in the show and all that, but to hear that JYP will just add people when they made a whole show with so much potential members, like, what was the purpose of the show then? I mean, it's not been confirmed so far, and we don't even know who they would add if they did. So we just have to see whether it'll just be the 4 of the remaining members or whether they'll actually add more members. But yeah, not really smooth sailing pre-debut wise, but we'll just have to see how their debut era goes. Final thoughts. I feel like overall, the quality of music seems to be my issue with JYP, where it just kind of isn't hitting in the first place. It ages like milk, or it's like trendy music where you vibe with it until you ultimately kind of forget about it. All the girl groups are suffering to varying extents with their musical direction. We have 2 bands who are doing alright, but aren't the representation of JYP, so we don't really see their success. And then we only have 1 proper boy group that's thriving. Plus, JYP has been dabbling internationally with their Chinese boy group of Boy Story, their Japanese girl group of Nizu, and their new focus in America with the program A2K to create a girl group within America, plus Nizi Season 2 to create a Japanese boy group. They're really doing a lot, which honestly, good for them. But I also low-key feel like they're kind of fumbling the quality. Although they can incur some real 50-50 releases, over time, the drop-off will start to be a bit more prominent with the amount of competition within the industry. I mean, many of the leading groups within the 4th gen are starting to come from non-big 3 companies now. So that low-key says a lot in terms of JYP needing to rethink their strategy to bounce back from this really meh year so far. But yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and let me know your thoughts on how JYP is doing in 2023 and just any other thoughts you have on these JYP groups. I'm low-key going with the flow in terms of releases because, once again, I don't really have an idea that I want to look into, but something will pop up for sure. Groups that I do want to kind of look into but don't really have a direction into what exactly I want to convey include Purple Kiss, Lightsum, the upcoming boy group Even, and also maybe like something Girls Planet related. So if you're interested in any of these groups or video ideas, then please like and subscribe to keep up to date, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!